Well, as you were doing the journey towards being more mindful, what are things looking back that you realized you were not paying attention to in that relationship that you missed or were just purposely ignoring?
Sure. When I first met Marco, he was telling me how he was going through, quote, a career transition. He was leaving a job that wasn't fulfilling and going to find a new career. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Someone that really wants to pursue their passions, no matter what. Like, joy is more important than money. And keep in mind that my American dollar has so much more value than Argentinian pesos. So I was like, it's okay, Marco, while you're doing your job search, I'll take care of us. Like, in my mind, he was the one for me. He even signed all of those minus emails to me with the one. That's how far gone we were just in those first 30 days. So at this point, I was like, we're going to be together forever. I'll just, I'll take care of us. I'll buy the flights. I'll pay for the Airbnbs. I'll get you haircuts. That is, although it sounds nice, that's actually one of my toxic traits.
Oh, like the people pleaser?
Yes, the people pleaser. I swoop in and I overhelp. And it's not even that they necessarily ask me. I just think, oh, you need this. I'm going to just give it to you without you even telling me that you need it. And that builds resentment because he felt so much pressure to like have to work and to find the job. And then it was like, I felt like because I was giving him all that I was required something in exchange. And I started to get really bossy and really controlling and being like, why are you playing video games? You should be applying for jobs. Like, that's not my life. It's not my place to say that. So it created a lot of mistrust and a big divide in our relationship. So those things that I just described, I call them toxic dating loops. It's basically a loop of pattern, like a pattern of behavior that we get stuck in, not because we're bad people or because we're bad at love, but because that's all we know from how we grew up. And learning that kept us safe. It served a function. But unless we can identify the loop, to take a step back with that mindfulness that we can talk about, like, how do you do that later? But if we can't really take time to say, hey, there's something very specific that I'm doing here. And if I just figure out what it is, then I can stop doing it and I'll get a different result.
Now, it's interesting, as you were saying that, my thought was like, man, because this could be a scenario where you say, and he was doing all this stuff and it was really his fault and this and that, but you really went into how you recognize the things you were doing were actually contributing to him not liking you. And I try to stress that on my end for guys, sometimes when women are pulling away, it's because you're doing stuff that you might be unaware of, but you're doing things that are causing a person that actually likes you to want to get away from you. So how are you able to bypass the ego part that says, I want to blame everybody else, and then really internally look and say, but wait a minute, I'm the common denominator. It must be something that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. I think that is built into mindfulness. So maybe we can take a step back and say, what even is mindfulness? People use this word in common language so often, and I don't think we're quite nailing it when we're like, oh, be mindful of the oncoming traffic. It's not quite it. But then there's also people that think mindfulness is just for yogis or people that meditate all day. It's really, I'm going to say somewhere in the middle. You're noticing things, yes, and it is a practice, but it's more that it's the practice of noticing things in the present moment without judging it. You're not trying to say that it's bad, good, wrong. You're not trying to change it. Just saying, this is a person that I'm dating. They have XYZ qualities. I have XYZ qualities. When I look at the facts of this situation, is it going to lead me to what I want? But in order to do that, you have to learn to really get that ego out of the way and allow things to come up that might be painful to admit. I think that's what you're saying is sometimes it's scary to look at the truth of ourselves or even the truth of someone that we were really excited about. We don't want to admit that things might not work out with them after investing a certain amount of time or something. Yeah. Because we're coming at the situation with that non-judgment piece, it helps us to let go of the fear of shame, the fear of ourselves being bad or wrong. I mean, dating is tough. It's a risk. We're putting ourselves out there to be perceived by the other person. And we can take that personally. Oh, are they going to accept me? Am I good enough for them? Are they going to reject me? We're putting the power in the other person. But when we can be mindful, we say, oh, there's no right or wrong. We're all unique, valuable people in our own right. Is this person the kind of person that is going to benefit me and what I'm looking for, and vice versa? And if not, that's okay. None of us are bad or wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. The part we said about like, it's not necessarily right or wrong. I think a lot of people go into dating thinking like, it's very easy to be me focused or to be like, these are the specific rules as I see them that dating needs to follow. So, the example I give a lot of times is like, people trying to text all the time. Well, I feel as though in order to build a relationship, there needs to be communication. Therefore, I need to text her all the time and she needs to respond to me all the time because I'm going to feel some kind of way if that doesn't happen. And in the process of that, we don't think about, but does the other person actually need that? We think doing this thing is going to fulfill my need and make me feel secure. But what about that other person?
Mm-hmm. That's tough. I mean, ideally, you're with someone who knows what their needs are too, and that you can build a space where you both feel safe to share those needs. That was another problem that I had, an unhelpful behavioral pattern that I found myself doing is if I needed something, I just expected the other person to know. I wouldn't say anything. I might be passive aggressive about it, but I personally didn't know what I needed. I never took the time to sit down and be with myself. So I couldn't communicate it. That scared the crap out of me. I could not have a conversation about my needs. I grew up thinking in a really sad way that my needs really weren't important. And that if I brought up my needs, it could cause conflict or disconnection. So I felt safer to push my needs down to keep the other person's needs met, because at least that meant that the connection that I had would remain, even if that connection wasn't healthy.
Yeah. That's interesting because I like to think of myself as being emotionally intelligent and being somewhat mindful. I've definitely been with women who like, I'll very much be saying things like, hey, like, is this what you need, or speak up? And they're trying to not tell me because they grew up in that same situation where it's like, my needs don't matter. And I'm trying to say your needs do matter. So it's like, they need to be mindful that it's okay to do that. And I still have to be mindful that if that's not how they operate or that's not what they're used to, I have to be patient with them and also let them know it's okay. But it's interesting. I come across a lot of like women like that in general that just come from those situations where they were silenced or told your opinion doesn't matter. And it sucks because, it's like that shapes your whole world and it shapes how you view things and how you think people are receiving you. And then you go into dating and you're thinking that people are thinking things about you that they're not because you're thinking them about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah, you're really creating a safe space for them.
Yeah.
It's like and that's the other beautiful thing about mindfulness, like when you can learn to experience things outside of you and internally without judgment. You just notice them and allow them. That almost gives permission for the other person to do the same. Even if they're not quite aware they're doing it, it just creates a little bit of safety because you're open. You're not in a reactionary place or a fight or flight place. Maybe you are. We all kind of are in our modern day culture, but I think it really does help to create if you want to think about it in terms of like energy, just kind of brings the energy back to neutral.
You's a bad boy, but you can't stop, won't stop. You a high earning, high value, high class man. You a high earning, high value, high class man. You a high earning, high value, high class man. You a high class man. You a high class man. You a high earning, high value, high class man.